Good morning. It is everybody's favorite day of the week. It is day 4, number 53 with the man, Frank Scalish. And this one is going to be a good one, Frank.
We
How
hope
you
so.
doing?
I'm doing good, man. I went ice fishing and with some of my old Bassmaster buddies. And
Can you say who you went with? Because
I
that
can.
it might ring a bell on some of the fishing aficionados who listen to this show. A little blast from the past with a couple former Elite Series anglers who are still lurking around the, what are you, northeast, north central?
Yes,
What do you consider
northeast,
northeast?
and they're lurking. Yeah, I went. I got a phone call. My buddy Paul Horoski called, and he's like, "Hey, we got to get together and go ice fishing." I says, "Yeah, I'm going to bring Frankie," and he's like, "Cool." He goes, "I'm calling Schwinkbeck," and he called Darren Schwinkbeck up and said, "Hey, we're going ice fishing. Why don't you hook up with us?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm there." And so we did, man. We went up to a lake in Pennsylvania for a couple of days, and you know, had a time. so,
And if you don't remember, so Paul Horoski was something in the medical field. What did he do?
Pharmaceuticals. He's a pharmacist.
Pharmacist. Still a pharmacist?
Yes, he is. He still runs Gambler. He still has his gamblers. Schwinkbeck did like some triathlon thing, got himself in phenomenal sick shape and started doing all these crazy things. And then he works in Alaska for the summer and then comes home in the winter. And we had a good time. I mean, we told so many stories that could never be told on the air and laughed. So we're ice fishing and we're like getting real serious about it. And so Paul had an idea and he had all these brush piles planted and we thought we were going to go hammer the crappies on them. And the only drawback was we got like 1.5 feet of snow and there was no access to the lake where we wanted to go. And where we live, you can't run machines on the ice. You got to walk everywhere. And so
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's BS is what it is. So anyway, so we hiked through the woods to get there, but it was like 1/4 mile and going to the lake, it was downhill the whole way, except for when you get right near the lake where it flattens out. And so, we're going down through the woods, going downhill and jumping on a snowmobile trail whenever we can because the packed snow makes it easier to drag all the sleds and stuff. And so I'm like, we get to the plateau and the snow is up to your thighs and we can't hardly push through it. And I'm like, you do realize when we go back, we got to walk uphill the whole way back. And so we get out on the ice and go to the brush piles and they're like, 400, 500 yards from where we went in at. And the snow is super deep. We're dragging sleds. It was 10 degrees out and we're pulling with t-shirts on. We like took everything off and threw them in the sled because you're so hot, sweating, pulling and dragging. And then what happened was the lake dropped in the fall, never came back up, froze. And so the brush piles were in 6 to 8 feet of water, which is no bueno. All the fishing was much, much deeper. And so
we didn't catch any?
Yeah, we caught enough to feed ourselves.
Okay.
But not enough to bring home stuff. And it was terrible. So we spent most of the day in that area and I said, I got to get out to the main river ledge. And I start walking out to the main river ledge and I'm almost all the way across the whole lake to the other side because the river channel split to the other side. And we were on a giant, really nothingness area, but the brush piles there, phenomenal for bass fishing because it's a magnet. It's the only stuff within hundreds of yards, but it just didn't pan out. So we pulled out. We pulled out late in the day and went and made a move to another area with a little better structural elements in it. And by the time we got to the vehicles, we had a tag team sleds where 3 of us would jump on one sled and pull it up and then go get the other one. And anyway, let me just tell you, I'll never do that shit again in my life. We started catching them at the end of the day and we were laughing because we're like, there is no way we're putting as many calories in our body as we burn today. There's just no way.
My my memories of Schwinkbeck, his claim he was the one who wore the hockey jersey as his Elite Series jersey on stage.
Yeah,
He had
because
like Amsoil. And
yeah,
then
he played hockey. He played hockey. Yeah.
He played hockey, and I believe he is also the only Elite Series angler to sink 2 boats in one competition day.
2 boats in the same competition. Yes, that's why we call them shipwreck. That's what we.
One of them was his, and one of them was Bass, and it was up there on.
Oh yeah, Bass was steaming. They were steaming. So we call him. That's what his nickname is, Shipwreck. That's what we call him.
How did you get him on to tell that story? Because didn't he leave one floating down the Niagara River?
Yeah, he bailed on it to get his fish weighed in, and Bass was not too happy.
It was when Bass had the dirty dozen.
Yeah, Bass was
and they would tow the backup boats. It was before live, and they would tow the backup boats there. And if someone broke down, those are the boats they used on the final day. That were wrapped with like Purolator and whatever their sponsors were, and then you'd have to jump into one of those Tritons, I believe.
Yes, they
and
were.
Fish the final day out of it, which just seems so asinine now. You have 3 days with your waypoints, your bait, your motor, and now everything's on the line to make your career. And you got to jump into a new boat with different electronics that you don't know. And I remember all those guys would be sitting down there in the morning trying to punch waypoints in. If they were a Humminbird guy and they had Lowrance, or if they were Lowrance and the boats had Humminbirds, that it was just a debacle.
Oh, it was crazy because I had at the time, they had I think they had birds on those boats. I had a Lowrance back then, and then I had to call the tech guys to transfer all the waypoints over. It was that was kind of goofy, but anyway. But you know what? As everything grows, there's changes, and honestly, some changes are for the better, some are not, and then they do away with the ones that are not, and you know how the progression of growth goes. Mm-hmm. I mean, so yeah, but I'm telling you guys, it was a lot of fun to see them. I don't think I've seen Darren in 15 years.
He's still the same?
100% out of his ever-loving mind. Same exact guy. He is 100% the exact same guy. And here, we're pulling those sleds all over the lake, and his was the heaviest, and he never, ever complained one time. He was just happy-go-lucky, just how you always remembered the guy, you know what I mean? And Paul, Paul's insanely analytical, an incredibly great fisherman, and very cerebral, you know what I mean? And he's exactly the same as he always was.
I feel like we missed an opportunity, Frank, to have I feel like this reality show would have gone mainstream back in the Elite Series. You have 3 guys in a house, and you're gonna laugh when you hear this. The first one is Darren Schwinkbeck, and they have to room together, and it follows them throughout the whole season. It's like a real world with these 3: Darren Schwinkbeck, Grant Goldbeck, and Chad Griffin.
It would be like the Three Stooges.
The greatest house. Now, listen, I like all those guys. I'm great with all of them. I'm really good friends with Grant and all that, but just guys who, as long as you get that sucker in the water and don't miss your takeoff, that's a win.
And getting back, same way. It doesn't matter if the motor's hanging in the water.
Those 3 right there. Just an hour show every week. It would have blockbuster ratings back in the day.
It would go viral.
Hey, we got a lot going on right now. We have the final day of the first BPT. They went from Lake Darbone to a different lake yesterday, and if you saw, Randy Howell caught a 10-11. I think Jordan Lee caught 2 over 8 and they just did best 5, it would have been over 30. Jacob Wheeler had some megas. He had like a 32-pound bag if they did their best 5. So they're down to the top 10 for that. And then it is also the first morning of competition on the St. Johns River for the Bassmaster Elite Series, which is kicking off their 2022 season with 13 new anglers and a host of kind of older returning anglers. So a lot of action going on in the fishing world right now. I also believe there's a Toyota Series event that just kicked off on Sam Rayburn. And all of them are fishing a little stingy. All of them are experiencing a little bit of that cold front, the early year, the Florida strain bass. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes down. It looks like, based just on Bass Track, that they're catching them pretty good on the St. John's. I think a lot of that shell offshore stuff
Oh
is going to
yeah.
play big this week. So, did you
It
like
w-
starting the year in Florida?
it's the only place I could start. You know what I mean? Yeah, I didn't mind it. Back in the day when I first started fishing with bass, and we went to Florida first, I was a little in awe because I never experienced that amount of grass and that much so many different variations of grass in the same environment. And that was a real tricky deal for me back then. And quite frankly, the first time I went to Florida, I made it a goal of mine to learn about grass, to fish grass as much as I can. So whenever I hit a grass lake, I'm never going to be buffaloed again. And so I spent an incredible amount of time just bopping from grass lakes to grass lakes until my arsenal for grass fishing is, I'm so confident now. If I see grass, I almost believe I know exactly where to go to catch one. But it wasn't that way in the beginning. I struggled like a maniac down in Florida. And it was just because I was such a structure fisherman, and everything I did was structural
Mm-hmm.
oriented. Even the spawning pockets and stuff that I would pick, I would only pick them with good defined drains that went in them. So the bass would have solid migration routes to get into these spawning grounds. So I never had an issue on structure lakes. But man, when I went down to Florida for the first couple times, did I get my brains kicked in? It was
Well,
horrible.
Well, that's a good transition into what we're going to
Yeah.
get into today. But first, I want to remind we had the 50th show a couple weeks ago, because this would be 53, so that would be 3 weeks ago if my high level math is correct, Frank. But still, this was through February, correct?
Correct.
And I just put
And
the code on the bottom there.
capital BTL 22, 15% off LureNet for all you loyal watchers and listeners out there. And it's a good thing to remember that code, especially after what we're going to talk about towards the end of the show today. There's a bunch of new colors on the paint shop, which I would look at, and a bunch of Norman baits on the paint shop. So take a peek at those. But it's like Matt said, grass in Florida beat me up pretty good, and I vowed I would never get caught on a grass lake and not know what to do. And I think Matt, I think in today's show we're going to go through a lot of different types of vegetation.
We're going to go through 15 different types of vegetation to be exact, and we actually have diagrams and we have pictures of 13 of those types of vegetation that you sent me. So a very educational show on tap, and even just in the 5-minute kind of pre-show where you sent me the pictures of the grass that I can pull up in the show, I've already learned some things. So.
It's crazy. It's just so much fun. So I guess I guess we'll just get into it, because
Let's get into it.
Yeah, we don't want to run super long today, but we gotta get into it. So the first thing I noticed in a lot of the DMs I get when on my Instagram is that there's a lot of confusion on vegetation. So we're gonna do emergent first. Emergent is grasses that grow underwater, but most of it's out of the water. Okay. And the first one I want to throw up there is a cattail, because a cattail is not a bulrush and it's not a reed. It's a cattail. And the best way to distinguish a cattail is the flat, long leaves, but more importantly, it's like the brown hot dogs on the stems. That's all I could say is a brown hot dog, right? I mean, look at it.
That's probably the most easily recognizable. It's a grass. It's considered a grass. A cattail is a grass.
Yes.
Or a reed. Is a reed a type of grass too?
Yes, but a reed is very different than what a cattail looks like. And this is what people get confused on, because I hear people say all the time, well, I was fishing the edges of the reeds. And really what they mean probably is cattails. So that's a cattail. Now the next one's going to be a bulrush. Now a bulrush is not, it's round and looks like a whip almost. And it's not the same as a cattail. So if we go to the bulrush, you can see the bulrushes are kind of round. They come up, they look like little whips, And those are bulrushes. And there's a big difference. Like, I love fishing the bulrushes. There's a million little pockets you can flip and pitch into. Now, in this particular photo, if it was me, my first pitch would be to the pickerel weed right on the right, yeah, right where your arrow is.
The mouse there. So this right here. So this is muddy wherever this photo was taken. But
right.
There's a couple different grasses in here. But this is a different type of grass back in here that I'm circling with the mouse. What is that called?
Pickerel weed.
Okay.
Now, that would be my first pitch, because that's the highest percentage spot. So you got to remember and if you look, you can see pockets and broken pockets and little areas in the bulrushes that offer ambush points. Those are high percentage areas. So when you approach something like this, the idea is to catch bass with the least amount of pitching and casting. So if you go to your high percentage areas, like the pickerel weed bunch or like a pocket in the bulrushes, those are two pitches that you're more likely than not going to get a bite. The other thing I look for in the bulrushes is where I get a bunch of them all packed in together, and then I go for the tight spot, because that's another high percentage area. So these are things to keep in mind when you encounter stuff like this. Now, here's a crazy thing. Now we're going to show you the reeds. Now, remember what the bulrushes look like, because you're going to see what a real, true, common reed is, and they don't look anything like bulrushes. So you have to understand. So when somebody says they're catching them out of reeds or they're catching them on bulrush points, it makes a big difference in your pattern. So the next one would be reeds. Now look at that. That looks nothing like a bulrush, and it looks nothing like a cattail. It almost looks like corn.
Mm-hmm. This is on the Arkansas River. This is what I was pitching on the Arkansas River.
Yeah, it could be
a couple years ago. It looked just like that because a little baby deer popped his head out, and I was like, "Oh, look, a little baby deer."
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's 100% right. It offers cover to everything. Now, when you're flipping this type of vegetation, you're going to have to get nitty gritty, because you got to find if they're on the outside edge or if they're a few feet in. And then you also have to pay attention to how deep they're growing, because some of them will grow deeper than others. And if you're catching them, let's say you're fishing some and you're catching fish and you got 4 feet of water under your boat. If you go to one that's only got a foot of water under your boat, that's not going to be the same pattern. So it's easy to pattern this stuff if you pay attention to everything that's going on around you. So if you know that you're fishing your boat's in 4 feet of water and you're catching them on the outside edge, I don't even waste time with them that don't have 4 feet of water on it, because again, we're playing high percentage game here. There's too much grass to try to fish all of it. So you just want to blow through, and you want to focus on only the percentage areas where you've gotten a bite before. And that's kind of how I approach that. So the next one, and go ahead.
Hold on. Do you want to blow through all of them and then go back to? But because I feel like these first three all kind of have something in common. They're all kind of tall. They don't really have much underneath the water aside from a stalk, and they're all bank oriented.
Correct.
So like I want to go back to if you're cool with this, unless you want to go through all of them. Okay.
Yeah,
I want to go back to the bulrush for a second. Okay.
Good, because there's something to address there.
Okay. Where are these fish sitting in it? Are they actually in? Because to me, a novice grass angler, getting better, admittedly getting better, Frank, at grass
That's money.
fishing.
That is money.
Out of the three that we just saw, and I did pitch most of this stuff. It seemed like I know I pitched cattails, I know I pitched reeds in Florida, but okay, if I take my mouse and like circle an area, like how does a fish live in that stuff? Like there's no room for them in there, is there? They have to be on the edge, but
No, there's room. There's room in there for them. There's a lot of stuff that happens on the top of the water that looks like it's super crowded and packed in, but a lot of times it's really not. Um, the stalks when they grow, there's like channels and caverns that they can get around in between all of that, all of the bulrushes, which is why initially in the beginning I said, you look for little tiny open pockets,
Hmm.
or you look for the different vegetation, like like the mother-in-law tongues over there, or or you go where they're super packed together and tight because they'll lay right up against it like they would a log or whatever.
Okay.
Only taking the high percentage areas. Now it's up to you as a fisherman to determine, are they in the back where it's 1 foot deep? Are they on the faces of it where it's 3 to 4 foot deep? Now these particularly bulrushes, a lot of them will grow in sandier areas. They still can grow in the mud, but a lot of them will grow on the sandier areas. So you want to also pay attention to your bottom composition and the depth in front of the bulrushes.
So let's say you have, which happens a lot, you have a row of bulrushes, but then there's like a 10-yard stretch of cattails
Yeah,
mixed into the bulrushes. Is
there's a
that the juice?
transit. Yes, anytime you have multiple types of vegetation in the same area, it's a good bet to go there and fish it, because multiple types of vegetation is a fish attractant. It's something different amongst everything that's the same. Now, if you're going down the bulrushes and you hit a patch of cattails, now you're talking about a composition change on the bottom. Could go from sand to mud. And so now you've got another thing happening there. So these are all things to pay attention to while you're fishing grass, because everything will tell you something you need to know to narrow that pattern down. So when you're blowing down a lake and you're looking at 2 miles of bulrushes, you can go, oh, I could stop there and catch one, there and catch one, and there and catch one.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what we're talking about today.
Okay. So those are the three kind of tall, stalkish ones that grow off of the bank. You're not going to find those ever submerged.
No, if you see those out in the middle of a lake somewhere, you need to
There's an
go there
island.
because that's a high spot. Yeah,
All
you
right.
need.
All right. Moving
Now,
on.
the next one is maiden cane, which is I love the maiden cane, especially in the springtime. This stuff here grows. It can grow as thick as a field, or it can grow isolated, such as the picture you're seeing here. And if you notice in the background on the upper right, there's a tree limb in the water. A tree is actually in the water over there. This
I see it.
particular photograph to me shows you 4 insane high percentage areas just at a glance. The first one, the most obvious one, is the separate pile of maiden cane in the middle of the frame.
That I'm circling right now.
Yes.
Oh, that I'm circling right now.
That you're circling right now. That's the most obvious. It's set in front of the rest of the stuff, and it's singular. It's by itself. That is the high percentage spot. That would be my first fish, or my first. See how confident I am? That would be my first flip. Okay, would be to that. And my second flip would be to the leaner in the background on the upper right. That is a massive high percentage
Right
area,
there.
because that's something completely different in the maiden cane.
All right. We're
And then,
staying
of course,
four.
my third one would be the second clump of maiden cane just to the left. Yeah, but you're going to the fourth. Go more towards the branch. That right there. That would be my second. Wait, 1, 2. That's my third, and then my fourth is the opening right there.
The little
right
trail.
That little trail. And then of course I'm going to dunk one right in the middle of that clump of cane too.
So you fishing it all with the same thing, or are you going with like a ½ ounce, 3/4 ounce in the middle, and then pitching like a quarter around the edges, or throwing a moving bait around the edges? Are you fishing this all with the same bait, or are you alternating your weights on your, I'm assuming, Texas rig if you're in this stuff?
Yeah, I will definitely be Texas rigging, and I will alternate baits and weights. I'll have a stick bait on with a lighter slip sinker, like a Senko or a Yum Dinger. I like the Yum Dinger because it lasts longer.
Hmm.
It gives me the same exact movement, motions, and everything, but I don't have to go through a bait every time I hook set, which is why I love the Yum Dinger.
I'm
And
convinced that Gary planned that
oh, 100%.
when he invented the Cinco. He's like, let's make something that works, and then he came back and he's like, but every time you set the hook, you have to replace the bait, and then we'll
Exactly.
charge $9 a pack, but it'll work so good that people will
Keep
catch
buying it.
like 12 inchers on it and go through like $30 of baits, but then justify that they have to replace 3 packs.
Exactly, dude. It's an
It's
annuity.
brilliant.
It's Gary's
Anyway,
annuity.
continue.
So yeah, so then and I'll throw that. I always have the stick bait on. Um, I always have a craw on when I'm flipping this stuff. Money craw. I love the money craw in these situations, and the spine craw is good. Back in the day, they didn't have the spine craw out, um, so I would use a Zoom Speed craw. And then now that the spine craw is out, I'm liking the spine craw better just because of the little bit longer body length on it. It
Okay.
gives me the ability to put my hook in there and not be all the way at the end of my bait. So it gives it a lot more movement. It still has that super tight, fast claw action, but I'm getting more movement because I don't have to put the hook all the way to the end of the bait. So I get more movement out of it. And of course, the money craw is one of my all-time favorites because it's just, real slow, and it's just, gosh, it's money. And it goes through the stuff so effortlessly. And then I'll do that. But with what I noticed is I always have different weight slip sinkers on, especially when I'm fishing grass, because if I get sparse grass, I go lighter. If I need something to punch, then I got my heavier one. And I'm finding out that like 5/16, I started doing more 5/16 than quarters. Um, but I will throw a 1/16 on a stick bait on my Yum Dingers. I
Just
will
to get
throw it
the nose down.
just to get the nose to start to fall and slink real slow. And I'll throw that in more openy areas. Um, but you gotta kind of have that 1, 2, 3 approach to grass because
Okay, so what are you throwing? What are you throwing where? Let's go through this photo here then. You're
that's all 5/16 to me. This
all
whole this
okay.
whole picture could be 5/16 with the exception of the blowdown. I can skip a dinger in there on a 1/16 ounce
Okay.
and
Pegged. Everything
have
pegged?
everything's pegged. I don't ever fish without a pegged sinker.
Okay. And then the action of it. So this is something that stresses me out in grass that I have not figured out. Why the heck will fish eat a bait that is the same color, the same diameter, and the same shape as every single stalk down there and no action? Like, you pitch a craw in there, do, kicks,
Right.
motion, lateral line. Ooh, there's something alive. It looks like it. I still have not wrapped my head around why a stick bait around grass is so productive when it literally blends in and looks exactly like everything you're casting to.
Right, because theoretically it doesn't. It moves different than grass does. And of course you got a little bit of metallic in there, so you're getting some reflection. It's very natural. They can't, like, if you throw a dinger in front of a bass, whether it's wacky rigged, flick shaked, Ned rigged, they can't resist it. It's too natural. It's too
Natural to
normal.
what?
Just to their environment. I mean, look, you have all kinds of animals that live in the water. You've got salamanders. You have your minnows. Like believe it or not, like if you ever seen golden shiners going through the grass and then they stop moving, they look just like a Yum Dinger. They just sit there. And then they'll just do something, and it's not a crazy wild motion. Now if they're scared, sure, you'll see them skipping out of the water, you'll see them banging into the grass and all the grass is moving. That's different, but under normal circumstances they're not going to draw attention to themselves or they'll get eaten. And so that's kind of the representation of that dinger style bait. And what people don't realize, well, maybe they do, a lot of people probably do, crayfish thrive in the grass. They live there, they thrive there. Everybody associates them with rock and stuff like that, which is true. But if there's grass in the lake, there's going to be way more crayfish in the grass than in the rocks because there's more food, there's more cover. It's easier for them to get around. I mean, when I was punching and I would see the crayfish like hanging on the mats of grass. I've even seen them walking on top of the mats of grass. So this is something you got to pay attention to. That's part of the reason why I always flip a cross style bait in the grass, because it's just too natural. And in Florida, then of course you got grass shrimp also in the mix. So, you know, you got to pay attention to that.
I did get the next one to work, so we can talk about the next one.
So now we're going to talk about grass with leaves on the water. And of course, everybody knows what a lily pad is, so I don't have to get crazy into that. One of the tricks to lily pads is in the early spring, before the pads actually grow. You'll have dead pad stalks and some dead bulrush stalks mixed in, and that's a good early spring target area, because the roots on a lily pad are enormous and they're all twisty and turny, and so it gives bass an opportunity for hard cover. And so those are good bets early in the spring. I smoked them on the Red River one time fishing the dead pads, and I mean, I hammered them. My non-boater and I probably caught 100 of them in one day, and all we did was fish dead lily pads.
I don't know if I've talked about this, but this is a learning moment for me. We are going back to Ross Barnett in the springtime for the Bassmaster Open. The first Bassmaster Open I fished was on Ross Barnett in the springtime. Big, dead pad fields, stalks, they were just emerging. I flipped it. 3/8 ounce, half ounce. Got like one bite. Everyone around me smashing them. I called one of my buddies afterwards. I watched him catch like 5 or 6 in this one area. Said,
quarter ounce spinnerbait.
Well, no, everyone was dragging. When I was dragging too. 1/8 ounce, 16 ounce weight. He said, dude, he goes, your stuff. He goes, what do you think all those lily pads do? They die, and then they turn into decaying matter.
Right.
And he's like, there's little bitty clean spots around the stalks that you were talking where those fish are getting to bed to make it. And he goes, your stuff is going shoom, straight through the muck and
into the mud,
like,
2 inches.
Yeah, he's like, you're fishing. You're literally fishing in the mud. You have like a 2-foot window for those fish to hit it on the fall, and then it's 6 inches in this muck. He said you need something that floats over it and then drops down into the clean spot that they're making for the bed. And that the dead lily pad fields are, if you've never done it, it's really hard to wrap your mind around, because a 6-inch difference is like massive to them. Just a shallow, deeper depression in a massive field that all looks the same.
Yeah, that's an insanely good point. That's the thing. On the Red River, I was actually throwing a 1/4 ounce on it, because I needed it to, exactly like you said, sink slow. If you go heavier, it's in the muck. Most of the bites actually came the first second it touched a lily pad's root. You got bit. We caught them. So oh my God, did we catch them good? Holy smokes. But
what were you throwing on? You were just throwing
creature bait on that particular day.
And then this is something I ran into in Florida this past week. There were pads that laid flat on the water, and there were pads that actually kind of came up out of the water. They were definitely two different, but it seemed like they really preferred the pads that laid flat on the water.
Yeah, a lot of times, right. You're 100% right. A lot of times, like early in the spring, like a good thing to do. Like I learned this on Santee Cooper. The dollar pads were the best pads to fish in the spring. They're literally the size of silver dollars, and they grow, and they're not super packed tight together. Those were the best pads to fish. Spatter Dock is another one. We might as well throw the Spatter Dock up there, I guess.
Is that what this is?
Number 6, yeah. Yeah, that's Spatter Dock. That's another one. The leaves aren't huge. There's a lot of openings in there. They get on top of the water. They canopy under them. So what's underneath them is these clean tunnels.
Okay.
And so you pitch in between them. Now that looks like it's a real heavy mat of grass, but it's really not. You can get by with a 5/16 ounce slip sinker in that easily. You can get away with it easily in the Spatter Dock. And so you want to stay, the rule of thumb is you want to be as light as you can get away with when you're fishing vegetation. And that obviously now, if you're fishing deep grass, you're going to have to go heavier because you're fishing way deeper. But this stuff here, we're talking about, 6 feet or less with most of this vegetation that we're looking at right now.
Do a lot of these have different names for them too, known by different names? Because you mentioned the
yeah, well, we'll get to the pickerel weed and
no, you mentioned the maiden cane.
Yeah, the maiden cane.
Maiden cane is different than water willow.
Yeah, I got water willow in there. You'll see.
Yeah, I noticed that, but I would have just off of the top of my head. They look similar. Do they not?
They do and they don't.
My grass novice to say that.
No, they do and they don't, but there's big differences. You'll see when the picture comes up. You know what I mean? Okay, we're premature on the water willow. No, we're not. No, we're not. Go back. I'm kidding.
Nothing worse than premature water willow, Frank.
No, go back to the water willow because this is a really good point. So if you look at how the leaves are on that water willow, they call it water willow. Those look just like willow leaves. Okay, they're growing a little more straight out of the water, almost like corn. Okay, their roots anchor in nice and tight on the bottom. Now the cool thing about water willow is it can grow 5 feet deep. It can be in 5 feet of water. So when you're fishing water willow, that's the key right there. You need to associate the depth that the bass want to be in. And if that edges of that willow is in 5 feet of water, you can pretty much be assured anywhere you have an irregularity in that grass, like where the grass curves in or there's a pocket, you can see a whole pocket in there. There's a pocket in the front screen. You can see it almost in the middle, just to the right of your screen, right where your arrow was. That one, and then right in the middle, right there. You see a pocket like that, and you got 4 or 5 feet of water in there, you're going there. And then once you start getting bit in the water willow, you have to pay attention how far into the willow the fish are and the water depth, because it's the depth of the water is going to be more critical at this stage, because they're going to have a comfort zone that they're going to want. So that means you don't have to flip all the way as far back into the willow as you can if the fish are coming out of 4 to 5 feet or 3 to 4 feet. Now, if you pitch back up in there and you catch one and it's in a foot of water, now you got to focus all the way behind the water willow. And that's the key. Water willow is a good grass to target. The bass love this stuff. It's a really good grass. We're going to talk about pickerel weed now. This is an arrowhead type of plant. I always called them mother-in-law tongues because they're always flapping in the wind. It's a good way you can tell. These are arrowheads, and actually the real name for them is a pickerel weed. Bass absolutely 100% love to spawn against these things. I had a banner day on Okeechobee doing nothing but flipping these things. And I flipped 2 baits. I flipped the Yum Dinger and I flipped a Super Fluke with a 1/16 ounce slip sinker. And I had a huge first day doing it. The second day, I had a lot of company, as always happens. A lot of company on the second day.
Is it because it grows on is it because it's a hardy stalk, something that provides some cover, and it grows on harder bottom?
Yes, exactly. And the reality of it is a very hard plant. It's a hardy plant. If you ever snag one, you can't get it back. You got to go get your lure out of it. It offers them a lot of comfort to spawn next to something. And if you have some other vegetation mixed in with them, even better. Now, the day that I got them all on the pickerel weed, the pickerel weed had to be out in front of small bulrush and small cattail islands. And they were out in front of these little islands. This was on Okeechobee. They were out in front of these little islands, and there would only be like 10 or 15 of these types of plants dotted around only part of the island. They didn't grow around the whole ones, just part of the island. And so that was a bottom composition change. And those fish were in there like money. And it was insane. It was one of the most memorable days in my fishing career, because at the time I was still learning grass. I hadn't fished grass all that much. I was starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And when I figured that out, it like the bell went off in my head, and it was fantastic. It was such a memorable day for me. Just because I was starting to put something together that I wasn't really familiar with.
These can be kind of tricky to find because they tend to grow like in smaller patches in
Yes.
the middle of other types of grass. I noticed that when I fished the
Yes.
Harris chain, I was trying to target these to see if there were spawning fish in them. And you'd go down a bank and you idle down a bank, and I didn't see them. And I'm like, what do these mother-in-law tongue thing look like? But then when I stopped and started fishing, I'd be like, oh, there's a little patch of them. There's a little patch of them. And a lot of them are just, they're
Right.
not like fields of this
No,
stuff. It's just
no.
a little patch of it that maybe you can get 2 or 3 pitches in.
Yes, that's exactly how it is. That's what makes it so nice, because it's isolated vegetation amongst other vegetation. And that's what makes it such a nice target, and the bass really love this stuff. And here, look, I'm being honest with you guys. Bass love to spawn around this stuff, and I have 2 more types of vegetation where bass are going to spawn in it. And I'm making this known because we're coming into the season. Now, obviously up north where I am, we're not even close. But below the Mason-Dixon line and into Florida, this is happening now in Florida.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I was just there.
Right. The cold fronts are making some offshore shell beds a little more relevant, but they're using those shell beds as migratory routes to get where they want to go. So basically the shell bed at this time of year in Florida is the staging area before they pump up into the grass. But you got to remember something. If you see a million guys offshore, if you go up to the grass, you might be 50 yards, 100 yards away from everybody. There's going to be bass there because they all don't move at the same time. You have to remember that, especially about the spawn. There will be a major spawn where a lot of fish do this, but there will be fish before that spawn and fish well after that spawn, because they would not ever all spawn at the same time, because if there was a catastrophic weather event, it could wipe out an entire year class, and nature doesn't operate that way. Everything in nature is for survival. And so they don't all spawn at the same time, and they don't all move at the same time. Now, you will have bigger numbers moving at certain times than others, but for the most part, you can venture a better bet that if everybody's out here and you go up there, there's still fish to be caught, is what I'm saying.
It's a good point. Some would say that Jacob Wheeler going to a fishery could be a catastrophic event right now.
Dude, that guy's
to the fish.
Probably, in my opinion, and we're not gonna turn this into an angler appreciation day. Probably one of the best anglers on the planet.
It's unreal what he's doing right now. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. He's phenomenal.
Next type of
okay, so now
it's all vegetation, right? You could say vegetation or grass.
Yes.
Is there a difference between vegetation and grass?
I call it all grass.
Okay.
I don't, I'm probably incorrect, but so we'll just call it all vegetation. So now we're going.
It's day 4 with Frank Scalish. It's
all
grass.
Right, it's grass, dang it.
Or weed. Where in the country does it separate between grass, vegetation, and you reach a certain point in the country where it's weed?
It's only weed to a pleasure boater. Weed is a non-desirable object, and any land homeowner or pleasure boater calls them weeds, and they want them eradicated immediately.
But in Minnesota, there are Minnesota anglers, and they refer to them singularly, not like weeds. They refer to it as like an in fisherman deal. Like, oh, I'm fishing the weed. Have you heard that?
I heard you put your weed in there.
I was targeting the weed. Anyway, next type of
So now,
grass.
so now we're going to go to submergent, which means it grows underwater and it lives underwater. Now there's a million types of submergent vegetation, and I'm not going through all of it. I'm going through just some of the more popular stuff and some of the stuff that you're liable to see and recognize if you find it. So the first one, this is called two things. I've heard it called, in Florida, they call it pepper grass. And everywhere else it's called pondweed. Not curly leaf pondweed. That's a different animal. This is pondweed or pepper grass. If you ever hear somebody say, I'm catching them out of pepper grass, you can almost bet your life they're fishing during the spawn, because bass in Florida especially love to spawn in this stuff. I don't know exactly why, but just through my experience, if you find pepper grass,
You're kidding me.
no.
I just avoided that stuff because it wasn't hydrilla. I found little pepper grass patches out in 5 foot of water and was like, oh, I need to get away from this stuff. I need to focus on the hydrilla.
Dude, they love to spawn in that stuff, man.
That's disappointing to hear.
But you know what though? Like when I first fished Florida, guys were talking about the pepper grass. You got to be in the pepper grass. You got to be in the pepper grass. I didn't even know what pepper grass was.
Apparently, neither did I.
No, I had no clue what it looked like. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't find it if I was standing in a field of it. I didn't know anything about it. And so when I got back from that event, I researched the crap out of it. And it's a pondweed. It's called pondweed, but there's other varieties like curly leaf pondweed, which only grows in the cold water and cold water conditions in the spring. And the minute the water temperature starts hitting the low 70s, it starts to die. And when pondweed dies, not this particular type, but the type where I live, when it dies, it turns to black sludge and all sinks to the bottom, and it kills out all the native vegetation. Pondweed's not native to here. It came over on boats and ducks and, duck feet and everything else. And now it's taken over. It's running rampant. And some of our best grass lakes are getting demolished because the pondweed grows before the good grass has a chance to get tall enough to survive. Then it dies, and all the sediment falls on top of the good grass, and it smothers it all because it won't let light penetration in. But this is pepper grass, and in Florida, if them fish are spawning, you better not ignore this, because this is a very high percentage grass during the spawn to fish. So now, Matt, the biggest there's 3 types of vegetation that everybody is confused on, and every time I talk about grass, the confusion. I get DM'd out the wazoo about this. So this part of this is very important to me, and it's basically for recognition. Hydrilla, it's non-native. It's a foreign species. Hydrilla looks exactly like a Lodia. Okay, so hydrilla. If you look at the hydrilla plant, don't look at the leaves at the bottom. Just look at the hydrilla plant and look at the Elodia plant. For essentially, they look the same, and visibly in the water they look the same. And when you pull them out of the water, they actually feel the same. But the difference is this: if you look at the round leaf, you see how the leaves grow around the stalk on both of these plants. Hydrilla will have 4 to 10 of those per growth section. Like look at A, okay? A, they're showing 5 here, but that's fine. But it'll have 4 to 10. The edges of these leaves are serrated. They're jagged. Where you have the Elodia, they only grow in 3s. And they're smooth. And that's the way to tell the difference between Elodia and hydrilla. They're super smooth, okay? Now, the bass will spawn in Elodia as well. Alodia is a good grass to look for because they'll spawn in the shallow growing alodia, and they'll use the deeper growing alodia. They also use hydrilla, and that's the thing. They're almost identical in every makeup. So, and the bass love that. And the other thing that they love is milfoil. So now I'm going to show you milfoil, so you can see the difference between milfoil and hydrilla, because this is another question people don't understand, and they're very different looking grasses. Okay, so that is milfoil right there. You see how the stalks, the leaf stems grow around the stalk the same way, only they look like feathers on it. And I think I have a picture of hydrilla also out of the water. And then you'll see the difference. Like, it won't even be like, look at that, they're not even the same. I mean, if you get milfoil or you get hydrilla, the differences are so stark when you look at them together out of the water that you can't mistake them. Just flip back real quick to the milfoil picture and you'll see it. It's very distinctly different. Now, we have a lot of milfoil where I live. We don't have too much hydrilla. That's milfoil. So there's a big.
Just it feels softer.
Oh, yeah.
It lays down in your hand. As
it
shows here.
Right. It
feels, but it looks kind of the same underwater if you're not to the untrained eye.
Yeah, it'll be puffier underwater, but you're right for the most part. You know, it looks similar if you're just going by and you're just seeing clumps of grass down
Fish the
there.
same stuff in them? Fish the same stuff? Do you fish hydrilla the same way you fish milfoil? Or are there certain baits that are better in milfoil or better in hydrilla just based on the properties of the grass?
Well, the easiest way I can tell you is you're either punching through to get to the bottom or you're running something over the top. That's the easiest way to do it. If it's sporadic, you can use lighter sinkers. You don't have to use punch weights and stuff like that if it's sporadic and all broken up. So you can fish horizontal baits in that condition. When it gets tight and grows up, then you're throwing heavier weights. You got to get through it to get to the canopies it forms underneath. Both of these types of vegetation have caverns underneath them that we can't see because they grow up, the leaves fold over, and they mat on the surface. But you'll have big groups of stalks and then the leaves fold out and there's caverns underneath where the leaves fall out. So when you're punching both of these grasses, the first thing I do is I'll punch through and let the bait go to the bottom. And usually if there's a bass there, you don't have to do too much. He takes it, usually on the fall. Then if I don't get a bite right away, I'll yo-yo it a couple times and then lift it up so it goes right up underneath the mat. And it's stuck right up under the mat. And I shake it right up under the mat like that. Because what happens is a lot of times these crayfish, the crayfish will be upside down crawling up under the mat. And the bass, as your bait goes through and falls through, the bass are sitting there and they get it as it goes down. Well, if that doesn't happen, I'll pick the bait up so the bait goes up to the mat and I'll just hit the mat a couple of times with it like that. I've had bass literally come up and just whoom, right up under the mat and the whole mat goes whoom, pops up out of the water when they come up to get it. And those fish, when they get it and turn and go down. And it's the times when you punch through a mat and you think the rod's going to fall out of your hands, that's what's happening. Those fish are getting it as soon as it breaks the canopy. They're coming up and getting it, and they're literally pounding it. And those are ferocious bites. A lot of fun to fish that stuff.
And you're using a beaver style bait primarily?
Yeah, I actually, you're going to laugh at me. I throw the money craw is my number one go-to. Spine craw, number 2. I'll throw a beaver style bait. I don't ordinarily throw a creature type bait. Like I won't throw, like I don't punch with a brush hog, for example, and I don't punch with a lizard, although you absolutely can. But what I want something compact that comes through the grass effortlessly.
That's the big thing, is appendages, twister tails, things like that.
They wrap,
and it's the appendages that you're breaking off appendages, and it's getting stuck. Yeah. And that's why it's all the punching baits, the quote punching baits,
right,
are compact, small, little bit denser, little harder plastic, and not a ton of action, because it's through, reaction bite, the hop. A lot of the things that are underneath that grass are small like that. The crayfish you've talked about, the shrimp, the little bluegills and stuff. So it just mimics it, and it's initially a reaction bite,
correct,
followed by potentially a stalk and feed bite once you start yo-yoing it and bringing it up to the top of the mat.
Right, and that's something to pay attention to. Did they hit it on the fall? Did they hit it after it hit the bottom? Because when it hits the bottom, it's going to kick up a cloud of dust. Poof, all the debris on the bottom is going to kick up, and then I'll just lift it up and let it slam back down. Boom, boom. And if I don't get a bite within 2 times of that, I lift it up right to the base of the mat. So what you want to pay attention to is, did it hit it on the fall? Did it hit it when you yo-yoed it? Or did it hit it when you smacked the bottom of the mat with it? This is important, because now not only are you narrowing down the type of grass you need to find, but now you're narrowing down how you're going to get bit in that grass.
I've got that video of me punching that 7-pounder. Do you want to watch it and see if we can apply it to this? Because it is a mat.
Yeah,
it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, let me see if I can pull it up here real quick.
It's not the one where you smashed your cheekbone, is it?
No. God. Oh my gosh.
Dude, that was horrifying when I saw that video.
It was just saying. It was very painful. I'm not trying to derail you here, but I think it
nothing derails me on day 4, dude.
Hold on.
We just let her fly.
Hold on here.
Yeah, that's a good flipping. That's a good punch and bite there.
Oops.
Oh, did you see the 2 different types of vegetation?
All right. So this is what we're talking about here. Now, this is a little bit different types of vegetation, but this is the punching bite that you just spent 5 minutes describing.
Yes.
Boom, punch, goes all the way through. There's a yo-yo.
There's the yo-yo.
Another yo-yo.
There's 2. And then, boom. Oh, I see the rod loading up. All right. I love that, dude. That's my favorite, man.
And then we'll just ignore the rest of the execution. I mean, I get him in the boat.
That's fantastic. Gosh.
But that's exactly what you were.
Look at that. Yeah, the fist bump.
But that's exactly what you were. I showed that. Well, because I'm pretty dang proud of it, but also because it literally shows what you were describing.
Oh yeah, 100%. I should have sent you a video. I was doing some punching videos, and I had to do 3 baits. I had to do the Bad Mama and the Christy Craw and the Money Craw. And so I put the Money Craw on and caught a 4-pounder right away. No, not the Money Craw. I put the Christy Craw on. I caught a 4-pounder right away. So I took the bait off. I switched it to the Money Craw. I went to another mat and caught one about 5. And I put the Bad Mama on, went to another mat, and it was the same thing. I was yo-yoing it, and I got about the 3rd yo-yo off, and I went to lift up, and the rod tip just went down. It was over 6 pounds. And I said, "Oh, can you believe that?" I mean, literally, it took me like 15 minutes to do all 3 baits, but I was dialed in onto where the bass were located and the stuff, so it wasn't difficult.
Can you punch this stuff when it's not matted, or does it have to be matted to create a canopy underneath?
I like punching with the canopy. Now I'll go to a lighter sinker and punch but it'll be a lighter sinker because the canopy's not thick, and I can get a 7/16, a 5/16 through it. And so then I'll do that because I want the slower fall as it's falling down through the, more sporadic stuff.
My question is though, there is still a can. So you have the emergent hydrilla, emergent milfoil, but it's still thick. I think this happens in a lot of parts of the country, but it's not cheese. It's not topped out. It's you can look down. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but you can still troll through it.
Yes.
Is there still a canopy underneath there, or does the canopy create when it tops out and then there's not light penetration to grow on the stalks below the mat, and therefore there's a bigger canopy? Like, I know you see guys that punch punch the stuff that's not on the surface, but it seems like it's more productive when it is on the surface. Or am I totally off base on that?
No, you're not off base, and the reality of it is exactly what you just said, and that's very astute, man. Because as the canopy comes, some of your other vegetation on the bottom dies back because there's no more oxygen, so the caverns become bigger. I have punched submerged milfoil when it's not on the top yet, and have caught fish doing it, but it's really difficult. And those situations, I'm fishing more edges and fishing in the water column of, above the grass. It's a very weird thing. To me, that's probably the toughest decision I have, because I don't want to go with a 1 ounce heavy weight. So in that situation, I'm usually pitching a 1/2 ouncer, because the grass is still free flowing. You know what I mean? So you can get a 1/2 ounce through that stuff like nothing. But once it starts to cheese up on top, you half the time you can't even get a 1/2 ounce to dimple it. And then I guess eelgrass would be next. Eelgrass is a pain in the rear end for anybody that wants to fish a horizontal bait, because all the boat traffic busts the eelgrass off. It all floats in the wind, and it's painful. I was on Gunnersville a couple years ago cranking, and I pulled up to one of my most spectacular channel edges, and I couldn't even make a cast with the crankbait. There was so much eelgrass floating around. Now the bass use eelgrass. Eelgrass will also grow in the sand, and they will spawn on it. That's another good spawning grass. And the cool thing about eelgrass is it's always going to give away current. Eelgrass loves the current. And when you see the eelgrass all leaning a certain way, you know which way the current's going, and you know that the bass are facing into the current. So it makes bass position a little more predictable.
Say that again.
Okay. The eelgrass will totally tell you where the current's going. It's a 1/2 inch wide, thin blade of grass.
Ribbon,
it grows
like a ribbon.
It's like a ribbon, and it grows really tall. And so whenever there's the slightest current, that grass starts to lean, and you can see in this photograph illustrates it perfectly. The grass is all leaning, and the current's going into the fish's face, and you see which way the fish is facing, because it's more comfortable for them and less work for them to face into the current than try to maintain themselves with their tails in the current.
And brings the bait towards them.
100%. So it's always bass positioning. Eelgrass, like on the Mississippi River, it's a dead giveaway. You see the eelgrass points coming out, it's all laid over because of the current in the river. You know that's a high percentage spot right there. And so that's eelgrass, the other, and I don't have a photo of it, and it's my bad because I just didn't pull it up, is cabbage grass. Mostly cabbage grass will grow up north. You won't see a lot of that too far south. The best way to describe what cabbage grass looks like, it's underwater. It looks like tobacco plant or corn underwater. It's just got the big wide leaves around the stalk, and it's gnarly. And if you snag the stalk, you'll be hard pressed to pull the stalk out of the ground to go get it. It's a hardy grass.
All I'm finding is actual cabbage.
Cabbage grass, water cabbage grass. I don't know how to find it.
Yeah, it's all good.
It's all good. But anyway,
so cabbage looks delicious.
So anyhow, so I guess, I hope this clears up a lot of vegetation
Yeah.
issues.
Are there any questions on the instant feedback, real quick? If you have, if there's anything that Uncle Frank went over that you want to clarify, just shoot it in the instant feedback comments right now as we continue on with the show, dude. That was good stuff, man.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating to me. And here, when I first started fishing Bassmasters, I was so clueless about it. It was sickening. And now I don't now I hit a grass lake and I'm like, oh, cool.
I'm living
grass.
through it right now, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I mean, think about it.
I went and literally the second day of practice, I'm driving and I'm like, I think that's a hyacinth mat from all the research. I pulled over and I'm like, looks like one. Fishes like one. Way it's supposed to go through. Well, I'd never flipped a hyacinth mat before in my life.
Oh, yeah.
So I went back, I asked Charlie Hartley. I said, hey, he's like, he literally said, quote, bless your heart.
Oh, that's.
We're out here and you just identified a hyacinth mat. A couple questions. The yellow flowers on Kentucky Lake, are they anywhere else in the country? Do you know anything about that?
I have one thing I will tell you, whoever brought that up, if you're on Kentucky Lake and those yellow flowers are blooming, you better be in them because that's money. I don't know what that almost looked like water willow flowers to me, but I'm not 100% sure and I can't validate that. But yes, I have fished those yellow flowers and it is psychotic. It is psychotic.
If you were to start out with a weight that isn't canopy, you said 5/16 is your go-to, right? Just as a general rule of thumb.
That's my go-to, 5/16.
Peg tungsten.
Peg tungsten. Little tiny bit heavier than a quarter, which is a little bit easier to manage. But yeah, that's it.
You got some homework, Frank. Doug would like a chart of all your grasses that you can then laminate and keep in the boat. So when it comes back on your lure, you could match it to the leaf.
Oh boy, you guys are giving me more work to do.
Signature series grass ID cards.
That's
Frank
great.
Scalish.
Day 4's grass ID cards.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the best thing to do is get on a computer and look at it. Or if you have a Ziploc bag with you, take some with you, put water in it so it doesn't deteriorate. Take some with you, go home and look at it.
Legal, if you're allowed to.
And yeah, and if do not flush it down the toilet or wash it down a drain, just throw it on your grass and let it die.
Like I said, if it's legal in that to take it out, I think some of them you can't even transport grass.
No.
In some states, you have the clean, drain, and dry, and to prevent invasive. My question is, you have to pick favorite technique on a favorite grass. It is ideal. It is your holy grail of a grass bite. What type of grass is it? What type of year is it? And what are you throwing?
Holy moly. This is a real tough question because there's so many different seasonal elements.
You got to have a favorite where you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a good one.
I'm going to say suspending jerkbaits in the winter over milfoil is probably my all-time absolute, like, psycho favorite. Cool. Punching is probably next. I love punching. It's too addicting. When do you choose to flip a jig over a Texas rig around grass? To my style of fishing, I fish a jig in the grass when I'm fishing deep grass, like 15 to 20 foot grass. That's when I'm throwing a jig, and then it's usually a 1/2 ounce jig. That's pretty much how I fish a jig in the grass. If I'm punching or fishing shallow grass, unless it's broken and very sporadic, I throw Texas rig. Now, if it's broken grass and I can get a jig and maneuver the jig well, I'll throw the jig. But for the most part, I'm Texas rigging it.
We're going a little rapid fire here on some grass.
That's
questions.
Okay. How to fish water chestnut. Water chestnut's a crazy animal. It moves. It's a floating. It's floating. It's like a hyacinth. I didn't get into free floating vegetation in this in this chart here that we just did. I didn't do free floating. It's a free floater. Hyacinths, water chestnuts, they move with the wind and with the current. So whenever I'm fishing water chestnuts, here's the thing I look for. I look for depressions, little tiny ditches where all the chestnuts will blow in. And this happens a lot on the Hudson River. The tide comes up. There's a huge tide fluctuation on the Hudson. Massive. I think it's like 5 feet, 4 feet. And so when the tide goes down, all those things, they start to, the tide sinks, they bunch up in tight, mangled masses. You can't even get anything through it. But as the tide goes up and they start spreading out again, you can punch them. So what I look for is the ditches and the drains in water chestnut. That's the key. Ditches, drains, and drop-offs in front of chestnut.
Is that water chestnut? Said it was invasive water chestnut in New York.
Yep. Then it is. I don't see the flowers on it. But the thing is that it's the depressions, because as the tides come up, those fish use those depressions to work their way back up into the depth range that they want to be in. And as the water falls, they use those same depressions out. And bass are not stupid. You never seen a bass caught in a puddle, but you see a carp or a catfish caught in a puddle. So that's how they use it. Okay, bulrush and tules.
What's the difference?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I think they're both a type of bulrush. They both round stemmed like the pen. They're both round stemmed. I know up here we have tules too, and they're kind of round, and they're like little mini whips that come out. I'm almost sure that they're in the same family.
I've never heard of this.
Oh, widgeon grass. Yeah, I did. I have heard of it, and I was actually looking at it the other day on the computer.
Never heard of anyone on the widgeon grass pattern.
Yeah, look that up. Let me see that grass. If it's that stringy crap, I don't even fish it. But let's see it. Widgeon.
Oh, it looks really stringy.
Yeah, if that's the stuff, I don't even fish it. When you pull it up, I'll know. I'll know.
Hold on.
Because we got a new vegetation growing on Lake Erie that I can't stand. I haven't caught a bass out of it yet. Oh no, that's yeah, that is that stuff. Yeah, that stuff, I would run something over the top of it. I would run something over the top of it. It's really super, super thin. I know exactly what that stuff is. I've fished through it before. That's when you just, run a frog over it and keep on until you find real grass.
Hold on.
Yep, that's the stuff.
You don't really breed much confidence in the listeners with your analysis of the widgeon grass, Uncle.
No, I've just not had the greatest success in it. But most of the time when I encounter that stuff, it's usually around better grass, and the bass are choosing the better grass. I've never fished an area where it only had that widgeon grass in it. But if I'm not mistaken, I don't think that stuff grows super deep either.
All right, one more. What's your setup?
Well, this is a crazy question because rod, reel, and line for grass fishing are going to change depending on what technique I'm fishing. Most of the time I'm using an 806 Powell Endurance. It's an 8-foot. It's an 8-foot 6-power rod, and I have one with 50-pound braid and a punch rod, and then I'll have another one with 20 and one with 17. And so what I do is the punch weight gets the 50-pound braid. The 20 will get a 5/16, 7/16, and the 17 will get a 5/16. And that's pretty much how I do it for Texas rigging the grass. And even if I'm deep jigging, I'm using the 806 also. But I'm deep jigging on 17.
Good stuff. You mentioned the dinger a lot.
Yeah,
But that soft stick bait is very. I mean, if you were to just kind of start out around it, like definitely a soft stick bait is a go-to around all types of vegetation.
absolutely. I throw, especially the 5-inch dinger. I Ned rig it, I wacky rig it, I flick shake it, I rig it Texas style with a super light slip sinker, I rig it Texas style with a heavy slip sinker. Probably one of the most versatile baits around grass is that particular bait. And the cool thing is that they just did a Yum custom color program where they got 25 brand new colors in the Yum dinger, and they sent them to me last week. And I was ecstatic because I fish that bait for smallmouth a ton. And they have some great smallmouth colors in there. They have
It's on LureNet.
lurenet.com. Good chance to use your capital BTL 22 discount. I have a video that's about to break today or tomorrow, and it shows some of the colors, some of my favorites, and what they're for. And you really got to look at these colors for yourself.
I got him. Okay. I found him.
All right. So cool. So here. So look, let me see. What did I grab here? I don't know what I grabbed. Hold on.
But these are all new.
They're all brand new. I'm going to go with my tannin to dirty water kit is really simple. I don't know. Should I show all these? Can you see them in the bag or should I take them out?
That depends. Are you OCD to where it'll bother you if you have to open up the bags?
I'm not that OCD. Yes, I am. That's just green pumpkin red. I mean, that's green. That's June. That's Junebug red. Junebug red is a mainstay in tannin colored water and dirty water. So that tannin color basically looks like Coca-Cola, and then all the way to dirty water. That's one of my favorite colors for that. Another color that's really good for tannin to dirty water is a gold mine, which is it's like a smoky black with gold and a little bit of copper metallic in it. That's another good color. I mean, we can't go through all 25. But and then another color is Jello Shot. This color is kind of unique, so I'll show the Jello Shot. This color is kind of unique.
Like brown with blue fleck.
Yeah, it's kind of like a plummy brown with blue flake.
A plummy brown.
Yeah, it's plummy looking, but it's not plum. It's kind of dirty plum. This is a really cool color to me. It's very natural, and I love blue flake. Blue flake, black flake, purple flake reflect UV light. Did you write these
descriptions?
No.
This delicious looking color features a deep red tint with added dark blue and black flake to cause any wayward bass to stare.
I don't write copy. I don't speak that eloquently. I just tell you why you should get it. I don't write the copy. But see. And then those are just some of the dirty water colors, tannin to dirty water.
Oh my gosh, we might have to spend a couple minutes. Everybody loves avocados, even bass. This exclusive color is bright and beautiful, just like our eyes when the chips and guacamole dip hit the table.
Hey, I'm gonna show you avocado because I have a smallmouth bag here that I did. And an avocado on the Great Lakes is insanely hard to beat. Like, it is insanely hard to beat. And the thing I like about this avocado here, there it is. The thing I like about this avocado here is it's not flake heavy. Where is it? Here it is. It's not flake heavy, and it's got like, purple, blue, and green flake in it. But it's a true avocado color. Back in the day when I was growing up, all I did was throw avocado 5-inch kaolin grubs on the smallmouth at home. And this is the perfect avocado color. So I can't wait. And I just got these, so I can't wait to take these up on the big lake and catch smallmouths with them. And I'm not afraid to do the 5-inch dinger. On smallmouth. I don't have a version of that. I've caught smallmouth on the biggest crankbaits known to man. It doesn't matter. to me. There's another color that I want to show you, especially for you guys up north, where yellow perch is a prevalent food source. This is called clown, I think. Green clown. And this is a really neat perch imitator. It's got the olivey green pumpkin on the back, but it's got that perchy yellowish color on the belly. It's actually a light watermelon, but I like the copper flake in this thing. That's key for the smallmouth. Very good smallmouth color. And then for the people that live on the Great Lakes areas and places that they have alewives and smelt and stuff, Russ Vegas is really cool. You see the purple on the back, the purple pearl on the back. This color is crazy. It's crazy good.
It's a beautiful pattern that shines like a diamond on a hot day and better matches minnow shad than any other plastic ever thought up. Just in case you wanted to.
I did not write these descriptions. I'm just telling you people, I do not write this stuff.
Hey, Nate has a good story.
Fire away.
Nate's story, I'm assuming, is in reference to Jello Shot. Nate said, "Hey, we had a Jello wrestling party in college, and the pool was that shade of brown once all the Jellos mixed."
See, there you have it. So anyway, I'm really not going to go through all these colors. There's 25 of them. The best thing to do is get on lurenet.com and look at these colors. They're in the Yum custom color program. There's 25 different colors. There's some astronomical colors in there. I do want to show you one color though in particular, because I can't wait to throw this during the spawning season. And I'm going to tell you guys a really good trick about this too. This color here is called Heartache, but I'm going to tell you a way you can target better quality bass. It's very natural looking, but it has a little bit of pearl in it. This color, this is going to be probably my #1 go-to bait during the spawn.
Really?
This color here. Yeah, it's unique. I dropped it in the water. This thing reflects really good in the water. It's really a cool color.
Kind of pinkish, orangish. It's like a muted methylate.
It's muted, and it's not. It's muted. Methylate's really high vis. Yeah. This is muted, but you're going to be surprised how visible this is in the water.
If you didn't know any better, you would think it's a real earthworm that just crawled out of the dirt.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is totally a natural color.
So here's that's how it's described.
Oh,
I'm reading the descriptions on every one of these now, Frank.
See, I didn't read the descriptions.
This pattern won't leave your heart aching. This pattern won't leave your heart aching, but more like your hands hurting.
Oh, good. That's good.
Whoever wrote these, they need a raise, Frank.
They're going to get one. So
we had a lot of fun.
So here's a betting technique, okay? And this happens in a lot of lakes. Where you could see really good in about 3 to 4 feet of water. So when the bass get in that shallow zone to spawn, you see the beds and you see the bass. Okay. What I learned over traveling across this country, because it works everywhere I go, there's this invisible zone where you start to lose sight of the bottom, where you can't see the bottom anymore. I back my boat off and I throw the Yum Dinger up there, and I'll throw it on a 1/16 or a 1/32 ounce slip sinker in the invisible zone, and just let it cruises down. And I'm catching a lot of big females that aren't spawning where you can see them. They're spawning just where you can't see them. And so I'm catching a lot of fish guys run over. I took my son Josh out to a lake here that's a very popular and heavily fished lake, and the spawn was going on. So the lake was just masticated with fishermen because the spawn was in full swing and guys were out there just sight fishing their brains out. So I said, you want to see something really cool? And so I pulled one of my bait casters out with 8-pound fluoro on it, rigged up a dinger, with a 1/16 ounce slip sinker. And he goes, "Are we going to go up there and fish those beds?" And I go, "No, those are all bucks. They're all like a pound, pound and a half. We're going to stay way out here, and we're going to throw up to where you can't see the bottom anymore." And we crushed some giant females doing this on the day where everybody was catching spawners, and they're catching 9 to 11 pounds, and we're catching 3 to 4 pounders. Like, I don't want to say at will, but it was pretty close. So that's a good trick to remember during the spawn.
It's good stuff. What else you got? We've been going for a while today. We got a little bonus show. We're almost to the hour-and-a-half mark with day 4.
Yeah, that I knew we were going to run long because of the grass.
A lot of types of grass, but man, I mean, you could literally do a show on each type of grass. So I think you did a really good job of breaking it down and giving the day 4 listeners a really good starting spot, with each type of grass, something to fish it, how to fish it, identifying what type of grass it is during the time of the year and how you can best attack it.
Right. And I had to because I get a lot of DMs every time I talk about grass, how to tell the difference, what kind, what this, what that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did was, obviously I didn't have cabbage grass in there, and there's some other, I didn't have wild rice in there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I didn't have in there because a lot of it's very regional. Even some Spatter Dock is only grown in North and South Carolina. So I took stuff that they can generally find across the country.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get real nitty gritty with some of this particular grasses that only grow in a region. So that's kind of how I picked it. And then I picked the bulrushes, cattails, and maiden cane because I see a lot of people get confused on the two. I see them call cattails bulrushes, and they interchange all the names of the grass. So just to be specific, I wanted them to see, because if somebody says they're catching them out of reeds, you got to know if this dude knows his grass, because if he's calling bulrushes reeds, that's a whole different thing. You know what I mean? So
right. Anything else?
Nah, dude, I'm wore out.
Not really. Talk.
I can talk all day.
Got a lot of fishing going on, and there's probably a lot of guys that are fishing for 6-figure paydays right now that are targeting the grass that you just talked about in this show, using very similar tactics to what you just described.
100%. So just, guys, remember capital BTL 22 for your 15% off, because it's going to end pretty soon. So don't miss out on that. And check out those new Yum Dinger colors. They're pretty cool. That's
good stuff. This is day 4, a grass seminar.
It was. I didn't, and I'm here last night. I because one of your shows, Matt, you were talking about fishing your Florida experience. Okay, like when you got whacked in the face with the thing, and I really wasn't sure what we were going to talk about, because usually if I do know, I'll call you. And I said, well, I think I'm going to do vegetation. And then I sat down on the couch last night to watch some of the Super G competition on the Olympics, and I looked at my wife and I said, I can't sit here. I got to get something put together. I got to show these guys the difference. So I spent the rest of the night on the computer getting good photography so you guys can see.
The hard work paid off. I learned a lot. Hopefully our listeners did too.
Excellent.
Next Thursday, you be here?
I'm here.
I'll be here next Thursday.
Outstanding.
We'll see you guys next Thursday. It's day 4 with Frank Scalish. We're out.